Good morning, girls. Now we will see a simple topic in neurological disorders, that is meningitis. First, we will see introduction. What is meningitis? You know very well that brain is covered by layers, two layers called meninges. So we call those layers which are covered, which cover the brain tissue, are called meninges. Okay. So, what is meningitis? Meningitis is an acute inflammation of the meningeal tissues surrounding the brain and the spinal cord. You know very well. Then, what are the types of meningitis? Depending on the causative agent affecting the meninges, it can be divided into various types of meningitis. That is viral meningitis caused by virus, bacterial meningitis, fungal meningitis, and parasitic meningitis. Then, coming to the risk factors which can cause meningitis. First is skipping vaccinations. See, this is very common in children younger than 5 years of age, and this in this age group, viral meningitis is very common, and people under age 20 years will get bacterial meningitis, and people who are living in a community setting, low community setting, that is, they live very close together without any spacing. So they are more prone for getting this meningitis infection. Then pregnancy, which is a state of stress to the mother. So in such case also, mothers are more prone for getting this meningitis. Then compromised immune system like HIV/AIDS, alcoholism, diabetes, use of immunosuppressant drugs. People who are all having these disorders are more prone for getting this meningitis. Then coming to the etiological factors, see, it can be divided into primary and secondary. So primary bacteria which can directly invade the meninges and cause meningitis is Neisseria meningitidis. And secondary infections which are already there in any other organ, and through blood spread or some other spread, the uh, causative agents will be transferred to meninges and cause meningitis. That is E. coli, Escherichia coli, Haemophilus influenza, and Streptococcus pneumoniae. These are the causative agents. Then coming to the pathophysiology, once these bacteria or virus or the causative agent invades the mm, meninges usually through upper respiratory tract infections. This bacterial invasion leads to a rapidly increased blood supply to the meninges with a massive neutrophil migration. You know very well that whenever there is inflammation or any infection or inflammation, the neutrophils will be migrating to such particular affected organ for invading the bacteria. Then the neutrophils that engulf the bacteria and disintegrate. And through this, during this process of engulfing and disintegration, exudate from tissue destruction contributes to purulent material. You know very well this. You can see these are the changes in inflammation you might have read in your first year. Then the purulent material causes the meninges to become inflamed and increase intracranial pressure. So due to increased intracranial pressure, excessive release of 1 minute. Ravi? సరే సార్ నేను మళ్ళీ చూస్తా ఉంటాను క్లాస్లో ఉన్నా చూస్తా నేను చూస్తాలే నేను మళ్ళీ చూస్తా. ఉమ్, ఉమ్. Then excessive release of antidiuretic hormone which can act by inhibiting urination. This in turn leads to water retention, oliguria, hyperolemia, hyponatremia, and further increase in intracranial pressure. Then coming to the clinical manifestations, usually the first manifestation the patient will complain of fever, neck stiffness or nuchal rigidity. Then thigh flexion, apart flexion of the neck, which is Brudzinski sign positive. In the figure, it is elicited SEMA. Brudzinski sign. This is the Brudzinski sign. If you just flex the neck, just flex the neck towards the chest, then it was spontaneous flexion of the legs. So this is Brudzinski sign, positive. Then resistance to passive extension of the knee with the hip flexed, which is called Kernick's sign. You can see in figure. See, if you just you keep the thigh at right angle to the abdomen and flex the knee here, the patient will you can feel a type of resistance which is not possible to flex the knee, and if you just flex the knee and ask the patient to extend the knee, the patient will not be able to extend the knee passively. So this is called Kernick's sign. This is very very important. These two signs you may be asked in your examination for 2 marks, as 2 marks question. Okay. Then vomiting, photophobia may be seen. Then petechial rashes on the skin, acute confusion of the patient. Then if the condition is advanced, patient will have seizures and cranial nerve palsy. And in severe cases, if this is not identified and treated, patient will have severe headache and patient may go into coma also. Okay, these are the typical clinical manifestations in case of meningitis. Then coming to the diagnostic evaluation, history collection has to be done. Then physical examination must be done for these signs, presence of these signs and symptoms. Then blood culture must be done and identify the causative, appropriate causative organism and the sensitive antibiotics. Then analysis of CSF, then CBC, in analysis of CSFEC, depending on the elevation of glucose, whether it is viral meningitis or bacterial meningitis or fungal meningitis or parasitic meningitis, can be easily differentiated. And depending on the CSF analysis report, appropriate antibiotics may be started. Then complete blood count, electrolyte levels, random blood sugar levels, CT scan, magnetic resonance imaging scanning, and positron emission tomographic scan, skull X-ray, and X-rays of the skull may demonstrate infected sinuses. The cavities in the bone circle sinuses, you know very well. So these sinuses may be inflamed or infected. This can be visualized in X-rays. Then complications. Once this meningitis is not treated, the patient may have hearing loss, memory difficulty, learning disabilities, brain damage, gait problems, seizures, kidney failure, shock, and death. Then coming to the management, coming to the medical management, the first and foremost treatment is the pharmacological management. The usual antibiotics which are used in case of meningitis are ampicillin, penicillin, amoxicillin. Then if it is antiviral, it's a viral inflammation, then antivirals like tenofovir, antifungals like fluconazole, corticosteroids like dexamethasone to decrease the activity of antibodies. Then IV mannitol for diuresis and reducing the intracranial pressure. Then intravenous phenytoin must be given as management of seizures. Then antipyretics, acetaminophen or paracetamol to reduce fever, and along with this treatment, symptomatic treatment may be given. Then non-pharmacological management is maintenance of fluid electrolyte balance by IV fluid therapy, nasogastric tube feeding if the patient is unconscious or semi-conscious, vitamin supplementation, head and elevation to 30 degrees, 30 to 45 degrees only, because if you elevate or if you make the patient lie down straight, the intracranial pressure may be elevated and the signs and symptoms may be worsened. That is why hidden elevation must be done up to 30 to 45 degrees. Then emotional support and necessary information for continuation of care at home, follow up and rehabilitation is very very important. Then coming to the surgical management. Suppose if patient may cause, if patient due to meningitis, the patient get deafness as a complication, then cochlear implantation rehabilitation is necessary. Then coming to the nursing management, first is the assessment. You have to obtain a clear and complete history of presence of any recent infections such as upper respiratory tract infections and exposure to any causative agents, and assess neurological status and vital signs. See, this neurological examination is very, very important for you. See, this I am going to tell you after your examination, because you can easily concentrate on the topic and you can learn something. This time, this if I tell you just maybe you are concentrating on your exam, second year examinations, and you may not be able to learn properly. So that is why I am planning to tell this neurological examination after your examination. So a complete neurological status examination and vital signs must be done. Evaluate for signs of meningeal irritation and assess sensory neural hearing loss and vision and hearing, cranial nerve damage like facial nerve palsy, and diminished cognitive function. Then for next, depending on the condition, nursing diagnosis must be formed. Like first is the ineffective tissue perfusion, cerebral tissue perfusion related to infectious process and cerebral edema, and hyperthermia related to the infectious process and cerebral edema. Risk for imbalanced fluid volume related to fever and decreased intake, acute pain related to meningeal irritation, impaired physical mobility related to prolonged bed rest. Next is the goal is to enhance cerebral tissue perfusion, to reduce fever, to maintain fluid balance in the patient, to reduce pain, and to make the patient return to optimal level of functioning or mobility. These are our goals. Then to attain these goals, the interventions are: how do you enhance cerebral tissue perfusion? First, you have to assess level of consciousness of the patient. Then record vital signs and neurologic parameters frequently. Observe for signs and symptoms of increased intracranial pressure or decreased. This increased intracranial pressure may be elicited in the form of decreased level of consciousness, dilated pupils, widening pulse pressure. Then maintain a quiet and calm environment to prevent agitation, which may cause an increased intracranial pressure. You have to make the patient lie down in a calm and quiet environment. See, simple noise can irritate the patient, may provoke seizures. So that is why you have to maintain a quiet and calm environment. Then prepare patient for lumbar puncture for CSF evaluation and repeat spinal tap if indicated. And lumbar puncture must be typically precedes neuroimaging. Suppose if the patient is advised lumbar puncture and MRI scanning, first you have to do MRI scan and go for lumbar puncture. First, lumbar puncture should not be done before neuroimaging, because the symptoms may be altered or the findings may be altered. Then notify the healthcare provider of signs of deterioration, increasing temperature, decreasing level of consciousness, seizure activity or altered respirations, and intravenous mannitol must be administered as per the prescription. Then how do you reduce fever? You have to administer antimicrobial agents on time to maintain optimal blood levels, monitor temperature frequently or continuously, institute other cooling measures such as hypothermia, blanket as indicated, and administer antibiotics as ordered like paracetamol. Then maintaining fluid balance, present IV fluid overload which may worsen cerebral edema. See this when you are any neurological patient, neurological or patient with CNS disorder, it is very, very important to maintain fluid balance. And also when you are maintaining fluid balance or when you are administering intravenous fluids, you should be very, very, very careful. Why? Because if you give more and more amount of fluids, you overload the patient. This can cause cerebral edema, increased, and can lead to increased intracranial pressure, and sometimes patient may get severe seizures and patient may die. That is why you have to limit fluids must be restricted. Then strict monitoring of intake and output must be done, because you have to see whether there is a balance is there or not. And monitor central venous pressure very frequently, and administration of osmotic diuretics like mannitol to promote diuresis and reduce intracranial pressure. Then to reduce pain, you have to first assess level, intensity, duration, and location of pain. You have to darken the room if photophobia is present in the patient. Assess the patient position of comfort for neck stiffness, and turn patient slowly and carefully with head and neck in alignment. Then elevate the head of the bed to decrease intracranial pressure and reduce pain, as I have told you earlier. Then administer analgesics as ordered. Monitor for response and adverse reactions. Avoid opiates which may mask the decreasing of level of consciousness. Suppose if you give opiates in this patient like morphine, which is contraindicated, the patient may go into drowsiness. See, we can't find out or identify whether the patient is going into unconsciousness because of opiates, patient is drowsy because of opiate drug or because of decreasing level of consciousness, and that is why opiates is contraindicated in this neurological deficit patients. Then promoting return to optimal level of functioning. Implement rehabilitation interventions after admission, like turning, positioning. Have to done it should be done very, very carefully. Then progress from passive to active exercises based on the patient's neurologic status. Once the patient recovers, you can make the patient ambulate. And if a patient is not able to ambulate and get out of bed, you have to follow strict active and passive exercises on the bed itself. Then expected outcomes are enhanced cerebral tissue perfusion, fluid balance will be maintained, reduced fever, reduced pain, and return to optimal level of functioning. Okay, then you have to give health education to the patient and also to the patient attendants. Advise close contacts of the patient with meningitis that prophylactic treatment may be indicated. You should check with their healthcare providers or the local public health department. Any local, depending on their address and any local health, public health department people are available, you can refer the patient to them. Then encourage the patient to follow medication regimen as directed to fully eradicate the infectious agent. Encourage follow-up and promote attention to infections in future. Okay, so here now we have discussed about meningitis. What are the causes of meningitis? What are the risk factors? What is the pathophysiology? What are the clinical manifestations? How it can be diagnosed, and what is the medical, surgical, and nursing management? So, we can conclude that meningitis is an inflammation of the meninges. The meninges are the three membranes that cover the brain and spinal cord, and meninges can occur when fluid surrounding the meninges becomes infected. Okay, this is about meningitis, and I hope it is very clear for you. Okay, ma. Next class we will see some other topic.